I can still feel the gunpowder on my hands. The silence that followed the deafening noise was the most peaceful moment of my life. Watching Matthew's blood spreading across his bedroom floor as his eyes lost their light brought me a relief I never imagined feeling. 12 years of humiliation. 12 years of being reminded daily that I was an intruder. 12 years of hearing that I would never be part of that family. In that moment, with the revolver still warm in my hand, we were finally equals. Finally, neither of us belonged to that house anymore. My name is Brian. I'm 19 now. I spent the last 3 years in a juvenile detention center for killing Matthew, my adoptive parents' biological son. I know when people hear this, they immediately think I'm a monster, a psychopath. The headlines didn't help. Adopted teen kills brother out of jealousy, as if everything could be summarized in one sensational phrase. I was released from the center 6 months ago, and I'm still trying to find my place in this world. I ended up in this park because it's one of the few places where I can sit without feeling like everyone is judging me. The people passing by don't know who I am or what I did. At least for now, I can breathe without the weight of their stares. I never planned to take someone's life. Believe me, this isn't the person I wanted to become. But when you spend your entire life being treated like garbage, being constantly reminded that your existence is a favor, an act of charity, something inside you starts to change. It breaks. And when it finally breaks completely, there's no predicting what will happen. I'm not here to justify myself or to say that what I did was right. I'm here because I need to tell this story from the beginning. I need someone to understand how a scared, needy kid transformed into someone capable of pulling a trigger. If you're really paying attention to me, if you care about understanding how a person can reach this point, please like this video now, subscribe to Traumatic Accounts, turn on notifications, and comment where you're watching from. I need to know I'm not speaking into the void, that there's someone on the other side willing to hear more than just the headline. Because what I'm about to tell you next will change how you see not just my story, but maybe even your own life. And believe me, there's much more to this story than anyone ever knew. Things I never told anyone, not even the psychologists at the center or my lawyer. Things that explain, even if they don't justify, why I pulled that trigger. My first memory is of a foster home in Chicago. I was 4 years old, sitting in a corner of the yard watching the other children play. I don't remember my biological parents. According to the documents, I was abandoned at a hospital when I was just a few days old. I don't know if my mother was too young, too poor, or simply didn't want me. That was the first rejection in my life, but it was far from the last. At the foster home, I was quiet, didn't cause trouble. The caregivers liked me precisely for that reason. Brian is such a good boy, they would say. He'll be adopted quickly. But the years passed, and families always chose other children. Children who were younger, more smiley, less marked by waiting. When I was 6, it finally happened. Robert and Helen Peterson showed up at the foster home. He was an accountant, she was a biology teacher. They had a son the same age as me, Matthew, and according to them, they wanted to give him a brother. I remember thinking they seemed good, normal. Helen smiled a lot, and Robert asked me some questions about what I liked to do. I said I liked to draw. He seemed impressed. 2 weeks later, I was leaving the foster home with a backpack containing everything I owned, some clothes, a teddy bear named Toby, and a sketchbook. The caregivers cried, hugged me, and said I would have a wonderful life now. I believed them. The first month at the Petersons' house was strange, but not bad. They gave me my own room, with a new bed and bookshelves. Matthew didn't seem very happy about my arrival, but his parents insisted we would soon be great friends. Helen took me shopping for new clothes, and Robert showed me how to play football in the backyard. I was cautiously optimistic. It was at school that things began to change. Helen took us, Matthew and me, to the same school where she taught. She introduced me to the other teachers as our new adopted son. Something in the way she said it, as if I were a charity project, bothered me, but I was too young to understand why. In the classroom, when the teacher asked me to introduce myself, Matthew interrupted. "He's not my real brother. My parents just took him in because they felt sorry for him." The children laughed. The teacher reprimanded him slightly, but the damage was done. That day, I returned home in silence. At night, I heard Helen and Robert talking in the kitchen while I was in the hallway. "He's not adapting well," Helen said. "Maybe we were hasty." "We gave our word," Robert replied. "Besides, it looks good for your image at the school, the compassionate teacher who adopted a child in need." "And don't you think your clients will be impressed by your generosity?" she retorted. "Don't pretend you did this just for Matthew." That night, I learned that I wasn't a son. I was an accessory, a medal of kindness they used to impress others. But it was still better than the foster home, I told myself. At least I had a comfortable bed and food on the table. Over time, the Petersons' true colors emerged. In public, we were the perfect family. At home, things were very different. Matthew quickly realized he could do whatever he wanted to me because his parents would always believe him instead of me. It started with small things, hiding my school supplies, tearing up my drawings, excluding me when friends came over. When I complained, Helen would sigh and say, "Brian, you need to try harder to fit in. Matthew is trying to help you adapt." At 8, I made the mistake of breaking a vase while running through the house. Robert grabbed my arm so hard it left marks and shouted in my face, "Do you have any idea how much that vase cost? Is this how you thank us for everything we've done for you?" He locked me in my room for the entire weekend with only one sandwich a day and water. When I returned to school on Monday, the teacher asked why I was so quiet. Matthew quickly answered for me. "He's sad because he broke my mom's favorite vase. My dad said he now has a debt to the family." The teacher looked at me with pity and said she was sure I would feel better soon. As we grew older, the difference in treatment became more evident. Matthew got a PlayStation for his 9th birthday. I got new notebooks for school. Matthew could invite friends for sleepovers. I couldn't bring anyone over because, according to Helen, I don't want strangers in my house, as if I myself wasn't a stranger there. When I turned 10, I tried to run away. I packed a backpack and climbed out the window in the middle of the night. I had no idea where to go. I just knew I needed to get out of there. Robert found me sleeping on a park bench a few blocks away. Instead of seeming worried, he was furious. "Do you have any idea of the trouble you would have caused us if someone had found you? What would people think of us?" I realized then that his fear wasn't losing me, but what others would say. The image of the perfect family would be tarnished. The punishment was brutal. I was locked in the basement for 2 weeks, only allowed out to go to school. Robert made up a story about me being punished for bad grades. Helen pretended it wasn't happening. And Matthew? Matthew took advantage to torture me even more. "You know why they'll never love you like they love me?" he whispered through the basement door. "Because I'm their real son. You're just a broken replacement that nobody wanted. Your own mother threw you away like trash." At 12, I tried to talk to a school counselor. I told her about the disproportionate punishments, about how I was treated differently from Matthew, about the cruel things they said to me. She seemed concerned and said she would talk to my parents. I was full of hope. That night, Robert stormed into my room like a hurricane. "Who do you think you are, making up lies about us? After everything we've done for you, you would be nothing without us." The slap I received left my ear ringing for hours. The next day, I was transferred to another school. The counselor never contacted me again. Nobody checked. Nobody cared. Helen started giving me household chores that Matthew never had to do. I washed the dishes, cleaned the bathrooms, mowed the lawn. "You need to learn to be grateful," she would say. "Nobody gives anything for free in this life." It was during this time that I began to change. The quiet, hopeful boy gave way to someone harder, colder. I stopped trying to please. I stopped expecting approval. I began to keep my thoughts and feelings to myself, building walls around my heart. I had nightmares almost every night. I would wake up sweating, sometimes screaming. No one ever came to see if I was okay. Matthew, on the other hand, grew up like a prince in his castle. Everything he wanted, he got. All his flaws were forgiven. His friends admired him, teachers adored him. He was popular, athletic, charismatic, everything I wasn't. and he made sure to remind me of this every day. "Hey, adopted trash," he called me when we were alone. "Have you looked in the mirror today? Can you see why your mother abandoned you?" I began to wonder if he was right, if there was something fundamentally wrong with me that made it impossible for people to love me, if I was destined to always be the outsider, the intruder, the unwanted. At 14, I found a small refuge. An art teacher noticed my talent for drawing and offered me the art studio to use during lunch. It was the only place where I felt at peace, where I could express everything I was feeling through lines and colors on paper. When I showed my drawings to Helen, hoping finally for some praise, she flipped through the sketchbook quickly and said, "This won't get you a job in the future, Brian. You should focus on your studies so you can support yourself when you leave here." By 16, I knew I could only count on myself. There was no future for me in that house. I just needed to hold on for 2 more years, and then I could legally leave. I started working part-time at a fast food restaurant to save money. Robert took half of what I earned, saying it was to pay for the expenses I caused the family. The rest I hid in a hole I made in the wall behind my bed's headboard. Meanwhile, Matthew continued his campaign of psychological torture. Now we were teenagers, and his tactics had evolved. He spread rumors about me at school, stole my things, and denied it. Once, he took my savings and bought a new pair of sneakers. When I confronted him, he simply laughed. "Who do you think they'll believe? The perfect son or the troubled adopted kid?" He was right, of course. He always was. The winter of my 16th year was when things started to intensify. Matthew was in his senior year of high school, preparing to enter college. Robert and Helen talked about nothing else. They had already decided he would study law like Robert's father. The pressure on him increased, and consequently, the pressure he put on me did too. One day coming back from school, I found my room ransacked. My drawings were scattered on the floor, some torn. The money I had hidden in the wall was gone, almost $800 I had saved over months of work. And in the middle of the mess, a handwritten note. "Thanks for the contribution to my graduation party, XOXO, your favorite brother." I confronted Matthew in front of his parents, showing the note as proof. His response? To laugh in my face and say it was obviously a joke, that I must have hidden the money poorly, and someone at school had probably stolen it. Helen suggested that maybe I had spent the money and forgotten. Robert accused me of making up stories to tarnish their son's reputation. That night, after everyone was asleep, Matthew came to my room. "You really thought you were going to screw me over?" he whispered. "Don't you understand yet that you'll never win? I am their son. You're just a charity project that went wrong." Something broke inside me at that moment. I didn't respond. I just stared at him in the dark until he left, satisfied with his victory. But an idea began to germinate in my mind, a dark idea that at the time seemed like the only way out. 2 weeks later, I discovered something that changed everything. I was looking for a document for school in Robert's office when I found a folder with my name on it. Inside were letters from my biological mother that were never given to me. I sat on the office floor, trembling, and read each one. My mother hadn't abandoned me by choice. She was very young, only 16 when I was born, and her family had forced her to give me up. She had tried to get me back when she turned 18, but was told I had already been adopted. Even so, she continued writing year after year, sending letters to the foster care system, hoping they would reach me. The system forwarded them to the Petersons, who never told me anything. In the last letter, dated just a year before, she said she had settled down, gotten married, and still hoped to meet me someday. There was a phone number and an address in Portland, Oregon. When Robert came home and found me with the letters, his reaction was one of fury. He snatched them from my hand and began tearing them up one by one. "This means nothing," he shouted. "She is not your mother. We are your family." "Family!" I shouted back, years of anger finally finding an outlet. "You were never my family. You treated me like a servant, like an intruder, and you hid from me that my real mother wanted me." The slap came with such force that I fell against the bookshelf. I tasted blood in my mouth. "Your mother was a whore who threw you away like garbage," he spat the words. "We saved you, and this is how you thank us." Helen appeared at the door, pale. Matthew was right behind her, watching the scene with a barely disguised smile. "What's going on?" Helen asked, but her tone made it clear she didn't really want to know. "Your adopted son is showing his true nature," Robert replied. "Looks like bad blood always speaks louder, doesn't it?" That night I was locked in the basement again, this time without a mattress, just a thin blanket on the cement floor. My lip was cut and swollen, and a bruise was beginning to form on my temple. As I lay in the dark, something changed inside me. The fear and pain gave way to something colder, more calculated, a resolution. The next day, I didn't go to school. Robert said I was sick. In reality, he didn't want the teachers to see my bruised face. I spent the day in the basement planning. I would call the number in the letter, talk to my real mother, ask to live with her. I would escape from that hell once and for all. When they finally allowed me out of the basement 2 days later, I discovered that all the letters had been burned. The phone number, the address, everything lost. My connection to my biological mother had disappeared forever. Matthew, of course, didn't miss the opportunity to rub salt in the wound. "Dad told me about your little mommy," he mocked when we were alone in the kitchen. "A 16-year-old junkie. I bet she doesn't even know who your father is. Probably some other junkie or dealer. It's in your blood, Brian. That's why you'll never be like us." I counted to 10 mentally before responding. "At least she wanted me. She tried to find me. Your parents only took me to show off to their friends." His smile faltered for a second, and then he moved closer, his voice low and venomous. "You know what Dad told me last night? That as soon as I enter college, they're going to send you away. No college for you, no support. You'll end up on the street, exactly where you belong." Something must have appeared in my gaze because, for the first time, I saw a flash of fear in Matthew's eyes. He backed away quickly, as if realizing he had stepped into dangerous territory. That night I had a vivid dream. I dreamt that I was standing in Matthew's room, watching him sleep. In the dream, I held a pillow over his face, pressing until he stopped struggling. I woke up startled, my heart pounding, but not horrified as I should have been. Instead, I felt a strange calm. I started working more hours at the fast food restaurant, saving money again. This time I hid it in a place no one would find, inside the lining of my old foster care backpack that was at the bottom of the closet. I stopped confronting Matthew or the Petersons. I began to agree with everything, to be the perfect, grateful adopted son they had always wanted. Helen was pleased with my apparent change in behavior. "See, he's finally understanding his place," she said to Robert one night, not knowing I could hear them. "I don't trust him," Robert replied. "There's something in his eyes I don't like." He was right not to trust me. By 16, I had learned to hide my true feelings. I learned to smile while burning inside. I learned to say, "Yes, sir," and "Thank you, ma'am," while planning my escape, or something worse. Matthew's graduation was approaching. He had been accepted to law school as planned. The house was in constant commotion with preparations for the big party the Petersons would throw to celebrate. Meanwhile, my grades were dropping, but no one seemed to notice or care. One day at the restaurant where I worked, I met a guy named Derek. He was in his early 20s and was responsible for making deliveries to the establishment. Something about me must have caught his attention because he always stopped to chat. After a few weeks, he asked me directly, "What the hell is going on with you, kid? Your eyes look like someone much older." I don't know why, but I trusted him. Maybe because he was the first person in years to actually ask how I was doing. I told him edited versions of my life with the Petersons, about Matthew, about my mother's letters. Derek listened without judging. When I finished, he said something that stayed with me. "Some families aren't real families, they're prisons. And sometimes the only way to survive is to break down the walls." A week before Matthew's graduation, Derek sought me out after work. "I've got something for you," he said, leading me to his car. From the glove compartment, he pulled out a gun, an old revolver but well-maintained. "I'm not saying you should use this," he explained, seeing my expression. "But every man should be able to defend himself, and from what you've told me, you need protection." I took the gun, feeling its weight in my hand. Derek quickly taught me how to check if it was loaded, how to engage and disengage the safety, showed me how to hold it correctly. $800, he said. No registration, no questions. That night, lying in my bed, I stared at the ceiling with the gun hidden under the mattress. I hadn't bought it with the intention of using it. At least that's what I told myself. It was just security, insurance in case things got worse. 3 days later, the bomb dropped. I was in my room studying when Robert entered without knocking. His face was red with anger. "What is this?" he yelled, throwing an envelope onto my bed. It was a letter from the school. I was failing 3 subjects and at risk of repeating the year. "I can explain," I began, but he interrupted me. "Explain what? That you're an ungrateful, lazy brat? That we wasted years of our life trying to make something of you? Matthew never gave us this kind of trouble." "Matthew never had to deal with half the things I've had to endure," I shouted back, my facade of submission finally crumbling. Robert advanced and grabbed me by the collar of my shirt, pushing me against the wall. "You have no idea how much we sacrificed for you. And this is how you repay us?" Helen appeared at the door with Matthew right behind her, his face wearing that smile of satisfaction I knew so well. "What's going on?" Helen asked, though it was obvious. "Your charity project is a failure," Robert spat the words. "Failing 3 subjects, wasting our money and time." "Always knew he wouldn't amount to anything," Matthew commented casually. "It's not your fault, it's genetic." Something inside me broke at that moment. 16 years of abuse, 16 years of being treated as less than human. 16 years of Matthew reminding me that I was just an intruder in their perfect life. "You're leaving this house as soon as you turn 18, Robert declared. "We won't pay for college for you. We won't help you with anything. You'll learn that in the real world there isn't endless charity." As they left the room, Matthew stayed behind for a moment. He leaned in and whispered in my ear, "It's going to be so nice not having to share this house with trash like you." That night I couldn't sleep. Their words echoed in my head, mixing with years of insults and humiliations. Everything I had endured, all the dreams I had tried to keep alive, everything collapsed. I took the gun from under the mattress and held it in my hands, feeling its weight. An idea formed in my mind, a terrible, definitive idea from which there would be no return. But at that moment, it seemed like the only way out. Matthew's graduation was in 2 days. The house was in chaos with preparations for the big party that would happen afterward. Helen ran from one side to the other with guest lists and menus. Robert boasted on the phone to whoever would listen about my son, the future lawyer. And I was invisible as always. Or rather, I was visible only when they needed someone to arrange chairs, carry boxes, or be blamed for something that went wrong. On the morning of the graduation, I woke up before dawn. I hadn't slept more than a few minutes all night. My mind was strangely calm, as if it had made a decision without consulting me. I took the gun from its hiding place and put it in the pocket of my hoodie. I left the room and went to the kitchen, where I poured myself a cup of coffee. The house was still silent. Soon the others would wake up, and the frenzy of Matthew's big day would begin. Matthew. Just thinking of his name, I felt a bitter taste in my mouth. "You don't look like you slept much." I jumped, spilling coffee on the counter. Helen was standing in the kitchen doorway, already dressed despite the early hour. "Couldn't sleep," I replied, avoiding her eyes. "I hope you behaved today," she said, pouring herself coffee. "It's an important day for this family." "This family?" "No, my family. Their family." "Of course," I replied mechanically. She stared at me for a moment, as if trying to read my thoughts. "I know you and Matthew were never close, but he is your brother. You should be happy for him." "My brother?" The word seemed like a cruel joke. "He's not my brother," I said softly, hardly realizing I was speaking aloud. Helen slammed her cup on the counter. "Enough of this attitude. After everything we've done for you, you still act like a victim. Do you have any idea how many orphans would give everything to have what you have?" The familiarity of this speech almost made me laugh. How many times had I heard this? How many times had they told me I should be grateful for crumbs while Matthew received the entire banquet? "Yes, ma'am," I responded automatically, eyes fixed on the counter. She sighed, that exasperated sigh I knew so well. Go get ready and wear that blue shirt we bought for you. I don't want you looking like a bum in the photos. That blue shirt bought specifically for this day, so that I wouldn't embarrass the family in the photos. Not for me, but for their image. I returned to the room and sat on the bed, the gun heavy in my hoodie pocket. I took it out and examined it again. 5 bullets in the cylinder, 5 opportunities to end years of torment. For a brief moment, I thought of my biological mother. She had looked for me, had tried to find me. Maybe if I could locate that phone number again. But who was I kidding? The letters were destroyed. My chance to find her had been burned along with them. And even if I could, what kind of son would I be to her now? A broken boy, full of anger, with violent thoughts. Perhaps it was better for her to keep the memory of the baby she lost instead of meeting the monster he had become. I put on the blue shirt as ordered and kept the gun in my jeans pocket. Its weight against my thigh was both frightening and comforting. The house filled with voices as everyone woke up and got ready. Robert knocked on my door. "Be ready in 20 minutes, he ordered. "And try to look happy, for God's sake." The ceremony would be at the school auditorium at 10 a.m. We got in the car, Robert driving, Helen in the passenger seat, Matthew and me in the back. A normal family going to celebrate an important milestone. No one could suspect what was going through my mind. No one, except perhaps Matthew. "Nervous about something, Brian?" he asked quietly while his parents talked between themselves. I looked at him. His smug smile, his perfectly tailored suit, his perfectly planned future. "No," I responded calmly. "Just thinking." He leaned in a bit so only I could hear. "You know, when I go to college, they'll finally be able to get rid of you without looking bad. Nobody will judge parents who no longer want to support a problematic 18-year-old adopted son. You'll end up exactly where you should be, on the street." I didn't respond. There was no need. The die was cast. The ceremony was exactly as expected. Emotional speeches, inspiring music, young people throwing caps in the air. Matthew was called to the stage to receive an honorable mention for his academic performance. I watched Robert and Helen applauding enthusiastically, tears in their eyes. They had never cried for me, not even when I won an art contest at school 2 years before. That day, they had only said I should focus on things that really matter. Afterward, there was a reception with snacks and drinks. The Petersons circulated proudly, receiving congratulations for their brilliant son. I stayed in a corner, invisible, as always. "This is our other son, Brian." Helen occasionally introduced me when someone asked, always with that subtle pause before the word other, that little reminder that I wasn't really theirs. The party at home would start at 4 p.m. We returned to prepare the final details. Helen had me arrange chairs in the backyard, while Matthew relaxed in the living room, receiving congratulatory calls from distant relatives. Around 3, the first guests began to arrive. The house soon filled with people, music, laughter. I served drinks, collected empty glasses, smiled politely when someone addressed me. The perfect adopted son, grateful and helpful. At 6, Robert made a speech. He talked about how he always knew Matthew would be a success, how proud he was of the son who would follow in his footsteps in the business world. He talked about the bright future that awaited him, and then, almost as an afterthought, mentioned, "And of course, we're also proud of Brian, who has been trying hard at school." People applauded politely, having no idea how humiliating that moment was for me. But I smiled and waved like the good puppet I had become. Around 8, I realized Matthew had disappeared from the party. I looked for him discreetly around the house and finally found him in his room talking on the phone. "Yeah, it's going to be incredible. No, my parents are getting me an apartment near campus. No, the adopted kid isn't coming. He'll probably end up cleaning bathrooms or something." I stood at the door, listening. He still hadn't seen me. "Actually," Matthew continued, laughing, "I think they're going to send him away as soon as I leave. Mom already mentioned she's tired of dealing with his problems." "Yeah," he went on. "They only took him in to look good, you know? Yeah, a charity project that didn't work out." Something snapped inside me. All the humiliations, All the abuse, all the times I was reminded that I didn't belong to that family. Everything culminated in that moment. I entered the room and closed the door behind me. Matthew looked up, surprised. "I'll call you back," he said quickly to the phone and hung up. "What do you want? Shouldn't you be serving drinks or something?" I didn't answer. I just stood looking at him, feeling the anger boiling inside me. "What?" he asked, irritated. "Why are you looking at me like that?" My hand went to the pocket where the gun was kept. 12 years, I finally said. 12 years of you reminding me every day that I don't belong anywhere. Matthew rolled his eyes. "Oh, here comes the orphan drama again. Get over it, man. It's not my fault if you're not good enough to be part of this family." "Part of this family?" I repeated, feeling a bitter laugh rise in my throat. "I never had the chance to be part of this family. From the first day, you made sure to make it clear that I was just an intruder." Matthew got up, impatient. "Look, I have a party downstairs, okay? Save your whining for someone who cares." When he tried to pass me, I blocked his way. Something in my gaze must have changed because I saw a flash of fear cross his face. "What are you doing?" he asked, taking a step back. "You know what's funny, Matthew?" I said calmly, pulling the gun from my pocket. "You always said I wasn't family, that I didn't belong here. And you know what? You were right." His eyes widened at the sight of the gun. "Brian, man, calm down. I was just joking. You know that, right?" "Joking?" I repeated, pointing the gun at him. My hands were strangely steady. "It was all a joke? The insults, the humiliations, hiding my real mother's letters, that was a joke too?" Matthew turned pale. "What are you talking about? What letters?" "Don't play dumb," I replied. "I know you knew. You probably even helped burn them." He raised his hands in a gesture of surrender. "Look, I don't know what you're talking about, but we can work this out. Let's talk, okay? No need for this." "Now you want to talk?" I asked, feeling a crooked smile form on my lips. "After 12 years of treating me like garbage, after telling me today that your parents are going to throw me out on the street as soon as you leave?" Matthew began to tremble. "Please, Brian, don't do this. I'm sorry, okay? Really." I looked at him, trembling in front of me. The great Matthew, the perfect son, the future lawyer, reduced to a begging mass of fear. "You're not sorry," I said calmly. "You're just afraid. And you know what? You should be." The sound of the shot was muffled by the loud music from the party. Matthew fell backward, a red stain spreading quickly on his white shirt. His eyes were wide with shock and pain. "Brian!" he gasped, his voice barely audible. "Why?" I looked at him lying on the floor, the life draining from his eyes. I didn't feel the triumph I expected. I didn't feel relief. I felt nothing but an immense emptiness. "Because you were right," I answered, though I doubted he could still hear me. "I don't belong to this family. I never did." I don't know how long I stood there looking at Matthew's body. It could have been minutes or hours. The music from the party continued downstairs, occasional laughter rising up the stairs. No one had heard the shot. Finally, the bedroom door opened. Helen entered, probably looking for the guest of honor. "Matthew, people are asking for—" The phrase died on her lips when she saw the scene in front of her. The scream that followed still echoes in my nightmares. Robert came running, then other guests. Someone called an ambulance, though it was obvious that Matthew was already dead. Someone called the police. I didn't resist when they handcuffed me. I didn't say anything when they read me my rights. I just looked at Helen and Robert, their faces contorted with pain and horror, and felt a strange detachment, as if I were watching a movie about someone else's life. At the police station, I told everything about the years of abuse, about the hidden letters, about the constant threats of being thrown out on the street. I talked for hours, emptying my soul of all the dark secrets I had kept for so long. The public defender assigned to my case listened to everything in silence. When I finished, he sighed deeply. "You're 16, he said. "You'll be tried as a minor. With all this documented abuse history, we can argue for mitigating circumstances. But I won't lie to you, Brian. You killed someone. You're going to spend a good amount of time in a juvenile detention center. I nodded, not really caring. The future had ceased to exist for me the moment I pulled that trigger. The trial was quick. The Petersons denied all allegations of abuse, of course. They said I had always been troubled, unstable, that they had done everything to help me, but I was simply defective. That Matthew's murder was an act of pure envy and evil. But some evidence corroborated my version. A teacher testified about bruises he had noticed on me over the years. The school counselor admitted she had received my complaints and hadn't done proper follow-up. And most importantly, the police found remains of the burned letters in the fireplace of the house, small fragments that had survived the fire, with words like, "my son," and "looking for you," still legible. I was convicted of manslaughter, with the sentence reduced due to exceptional circumstances. 3 years in a juvenile detention center, followed by 2 years of probation. The center wasn't as bad as I had expected. I had regular therapy, basic education, even some art classes. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel constantly judged or compared to someone else. I was just another broken kid, among so many others. During those 3 years, I tried to understand what I had done. I tried to process the anger, the pain, the emptiness. I tried to imagine what kind of person I could have been if circumstances had been different. And I tried, unsuccessfully, to locate my biological mother. All I had were fragments of memory from the burned letters. A first name, Laura. The city, Portland, Oregon. It wasn't enough. The detention center was located outside Chicago, far from the city where I grew up with the Petersons. During the 3 years I spent there, I didn't receive a single visit, no letters, no phone calls. It was as if the world had forgotten my existence. In the first few months, this bothered me. Then I began to see it as a blessing, a new beginning, without the weight of expectations and comparisons that had crushed me for so long. Dr. Sullivan, my psychologist at the center, was the first person who really tried to understand me. He didn't look at me as a lost cause or a problem to be solved. He looked at me as a human being. "What you did was terrible, Brian," he told me in our first session, "but it doesn't define who you are or who you can become." At first, I resisted. I didn't want to talk, didn't want to feel. It was easier to stay numb, distant. "You have a right to your anger," he said in another session, "but don't let it consume everything you could be." Over time, I began to open up. I talked about the constant feeling of rejection, about how Matthew seemed to embody everything I could never have. Acceptance, love, a future. I talked about that terrible moment in his room when something inside me finally snapped. I didn't want to kill him, I confessed during the second year. I mean, I wanted to at that moment, but that wasn't the plan when I bought the gun. It was more of an insurance, a way to feel less powerless. Dr. Sullivan nodded. Power is something you never had in your life, Brian. You were constantly deprived of any control over your destiny. It was also during the second year that I began to feel remorse. Not for Matthew's death itself, which probably says something terrible about me, but for what could have been, for all the possibilities that closed at the moment I pulled that trigger. I could have just left, I said to Dr. Sullivan. I could have run away, looked for my real mother, built another life. Yes, he agreed, but you were a traumatized child, without support, without prospects. Your actions were terrible, but understandable within the context. In my last year at the center, I focused on finishing high school. I discovered I was good at math, something I had never realized before. I also continued drawing, finding in art an outlet for emotions I still couldn't express in words. 2 weeks before my release, Dr. Sullivan brought me surprising news. "We found a social worker who remembers your case," he said. "She managed to locate some documents from the foster care system. Your biological mother's name is Laura Mitchell. She lives in Portland and still asks about you." I felt my heart race. "Does she know what I did?" He nodded gravely. "Yes, we told her. She still wants to meet you." I left the center on an autumn morning at 17. Unlike the other young people who usually had relatives waiting for them, I was met only by a social worker who would take me to a temporary shelter. But I had a plan. I had saved some money working in the center's laundry. I would finish my probation and then go to Portland. The first months in freedom were strange. The world seemed too big, too loud. I got a job at a bakery and rented a tiny room in a distant neighborhood. Every Thursday, I reported to my probation officer, who checked if I was following all the rules. Fixed job, no drugs or alcohol, curfew at 10 p.m. Part of me wanted to contact Laura immediately, but another part was afraid. What if she rejected me after meeting me in person? What if I disappointed her, just as I had disappointed everyone else? 6 months after my release, I gathered courage and called the number Dr. Sullivan had given me. A woman answered. Her voice was soft, a bit hesitant. Hello, Laura. My voice faltered. My name is Brian. I think I'm your son. There was silence on the other end of the line, followed by a muffled sob. Brian, is it really you? My God, I looked for you for so long. We talked for almost 2 hours. She told me how she had been forced by her parents to give me up for adoption, how she had tried to find me as soon as she reached adulthood, how she had never given up on me. I know what happened, she finally said. I know what you did. I closed my eyes, expecting rejection. I can't imagine what you went through, Brian. I can't say I understand what you did, but I want you to know, you will always be my son. Always. Those words made something break inside me. I cried like I hadn't cried since childhood. 2 months later, when my probation allowed me to leave the city, I traveled to Portland to meet her. She lived in a simple but cozy apartment with her husband, Carlos, who greeted me with a firm handshake and gentle eyes. They had a 7-year-old daughter, Julia, my half-sister. Julia looked at me with curiosity, without fear or judgment. Do you like to draw? She asked, offering me one of her colored pencils. In that moment, I felt something I had never felt before, the possibility of belonging. Today, 6 months after leaving the center, I'm still trying to figure out who I am. I still have nightmares about that night. I still sometimes wake up feeling the weight of the gun in my hand, but I also have different dreams now. Dreams about studying, about art, about a future that for so long seemed impossible. I don't live with Laura. I'm not ready for that yet, and maybe I never will be. But we talk every week. She sends me pictures of Julia, tells me about her life, about the family I could have had. The guilt for what I did never completely goes away. I took a life, destroyed a family. There's no undoing that, no way to compensate. Sometimes I wonder if Matthew would be different today, if he would have matured, if we would have found some form of peace. Other times I wonder if I would have survived that house without the gun, if the hatred I cultivated for years would have ended up consuming me in another way. I have no answers. I only know that I'm trying to build something from the ruins, trying to find a purpose, a way to give some meaning to all of this. In my sessions with my new psychologist, I talk about the anger I still sometimes feel, about the fear that there's something fundamentally broken inside me, about the terror of someday losing control again. Violence is not your nature, Brian, she tells me. It was a response to extreme circumstances. You have a choice now. You always have a choice. I want to believe that. I want to believe there's more to me than that terrible moment, more than the sum of rejections and abuses that shaped my childhood. When I think about the future, I see possibilities that before I couldn't imagine. Maybe college, maybe a career in design, maybe someday a family of my own where no one will ever feel like an intruder. I know many will never forgive me. The Petersons certainly won't. And perhaps I'll never completely forgive myself, but I'm learning to live with it. I'm learning that a person is not just their worst action, even if that action is terrible. Sitting in this park now, watching normal people living their normal lives, I feel a strange mixture of isolation and hope. I'm still on the margins, still an observer of life, but for the first time, I glimpse a path back. If you've made it this far and understood what I've been through, please like this video, subscribe to the Traumatic Accounts channel, turn on notifications, and comment what time it is where you are right now. I'm not asking for sympathy or forgiveness for what I did. I'm just asking for understanding that violence doesn't come from nowhere, that broken children can become dangerous adults, that the system failed not just me, but Matthew too. This is my story. It's not pretty, it doesn't have a happy ending, but it's real. And if it serves to make a single person look differently at that quiet child, that teenager with sad eyes, that young person who is clearly suffering, then maybe it's worth telling. My name is Brian. I'm 19 years old. I killed my adoptive brother, and I'm trying to find my way back to humanity.